Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and today we're talking about boudoir photography from a male photographer. All right, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. I am Raymond Hatfield, as always, your host of the Beginner Photography Podcast, I just said that, and wedding photographer here in Indianapolis. Today is an episode that has been requested by quite a few of the members of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. It's one of those that I just haven't done before, and that is with a boudoir photographer. Now, before we get into this interview, if you don't know what boudoir is, it is intimate portraiture, typically with a woman right in front of the camera. So when you hear us talking today, kind of imagine that if you haven't seen it before. So I hope that gives you kind of an idea. Typically it's done either as a gift, or it is very empowering to be in front of the camera in a very vulnerable state. So it's been taking off over the past few years, and today, like I said, I'm super excited to be talking with not only a male photographer, which is predominantly female-dominated industry, I guess, or genre, but one who is just done incredible things in Southern California, in Los Angeles, of all places. He has not only made a name for himself, but he has been known as one of the best. So today's episode is really great. But first, I want to share a little something about this week. Today, if you're listening the day that this comes out, Monday, June 3rd, 2019, I'm super excited because I have been working so hard on this new course that is coming out, Auto to Amazing, and that is actually being soft launched tomorrow. So the majority of the course is done. It is finished to this point, right? So now I'm going to invite 50 students to join the beta launch so that I can get their feedback, make sure that the course is everything that it needs to be, that you learn everything that needs to be learned, because I want this to be the fastest way to learn how to shoot in manual, guaranteed. That's what I want. That is the goal for this course. And I don't just mean I guarantee it. I mean, I'm going to guarantee it. And that if you don't learn how to shoot manual in 30 days after taking the course, then I'm going to refund you not only all of your money, but 150% of the purchase price. That is how confident I am in this course. So like I said, though, the beta launch is going to open up tomorrow to just 50 students, and that is only going to be available to members of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So there you go. There is a reason, if you haven't already joined the Facebook group, to join, is that I do stuff like this for members of the group because, well, they obviously take their photography seriously. So I will have more information for you, the listeners, if you're not already a part of the group, in the coming weeks when I have the official public launch. And like I said, you will be the first to know about it here on the podcast. So that's it. Okay, let's go ahead and get on into today's interview right now. It is with Michael Sasser. Like I said, one of the top boudoir photographers, and he's made a name for himself in LA, of all places. One of the places where, photographers go to be successful, and he has done it. So I had a great talk with Michael today. He's just an open book. He is excited to share about everything. And if you get a chance, we talk about it a little bit in the interview, but he has a very, very informative YouTube channel with lots of tips, specifically for boudoir photographers, obviously, and just to hear that male perspective is really, really, really interesting stuff and valuable if you are a male who wants to get into boudoir. And as always, I save a portion of the episode geared specifically towards asking questions about business and just making money with your photography. And I save that portion of the podcast episode for premium members of the podcast. So in today's episode, the premium members are going to learn how to interact with a client for the first time in a very vulnerable position, obviously. Having a shooting space, whether you can do a shoot in your house or whether or not you need to rent a studio, and some of the perks and downsides of owning a studio, as well as what sorts of luxury products boudoir clients are purchasing and how you need to be selling those. So if you want to learn all that, become a premium member by signing up at the beginnerphotographypodcast.com and clicking the premium membership button at the top right of the page. Okay, let's just go ahead and get on into today's interview with Michael Sasser. Today's guest is Michael Sasser, Southern California's premier boudoir photographer. And as you might have guessed by his name, he's also a male. And today I'm excited to talk about how he built an incredibly strong boudoir brand while facing the challenges of being a male in a predominantly female dominated industry. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't have the numbers, but if I were to guess, looking at the Facebook groups and when I'm clicking for boudoir for inspiration in new cities and such, I would say it's about a 90-10 split, something like that for female to male.
Oh, wow. I was going to think like 98-2.
Could be.
That's even
Could
better.
be.
Who knows? Yeah, we got to get the Department of Labor statistics on that to find out exactly what that is. So, Michael, I mentioned there that you built quite a big brand of boudoir photography, and in Southern California, that's no easy feat with a lot of photographers down there. So, why don't you tell me how you got your start in photography in the first place?
So, my start in photography happened in college, actually. My very first thing that I ever did, I went to Australia to study abroad, and I love taking pictures of sunsets, and I wanted to take better pictures of sunsets and flowers. So I just sort of self-taught, learned my camera, and that's how the interest got started. Then when I got back in town, back to the States, I hopped on Craigslist looking for a photography job. Is this possible as a career? I don't know. Let me see what's on Craigslist. And popped up was a youth sports photography job where they would go out and take pictures of these kids, and then you would sell the pictures back to their parents. And that was it. I did customer service for them. They let me take a couple pictures. I did good enough that they let me start shooting for them. So that was my very first photography job. And I was like 21. That was like 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. So since then I've shot everything under the sun: high school senior portraits, weddings, headshots, pretty much everything except like children and babies. That's pretty much the only thing that I haven't shot. And I picked up boudoir about 6 years ago. Just kind of was not part of the plan. As I think most people find boudoir, it's never really part of their plan. They know somebody who shot it, or they decide to have the experience themselves, or they or a friend asked them to shoot it and realized that they loved it. And then all of a sudden it's this thing that they really want to make the forefront of their business or identity or anything like that. So started about 6 years ago, but about 3.5 years ago, I stopped shooting everything. I stopped shooting weddings, headshots, high school senior portraits. I mean, you name it. And I exclusively have been shooting boudoir for the last 3.5 years.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I definitely want to get into all of that. But let's go back to the beginning. I want to know a little bit more about your experience in Australia with the camera. What was it? Was it just that you liked sunsets and flowers that you decided to go out and buy a camera? Did you already have one at that point?
So I didn't. I took like a high school photography class, but
okay.
It wasn't really. It didn't stick with me. It wasn't like, wow, this is amazing, and this is something that I want to do, and this is. I just took a semester of it because it was easy, and I didn't think too much of it. And then when I was going to Australia, I actually wasn't going to take a camera. And I remember my dad asked me, this is before camera phones, it's not like you just had one in your pocket all the time. And he was like, what camera are you taking? And I was like, I'm no camera. He's like, you can't go to Australia without a camera. And so we went into like Wolf Camera or something and bought me a Panasonic FZ6, I think it was called, maybe FZ7, which is a point and shoot that has a big telephoto zoom.
Gotcha.
So it's it's the same version as they have now, but forever ago is like 6 megapixels, 12x zoom.
Sweet.
And I pretty much, it stayed in the bag for the first 2 months. But I started to, Australia was just really pretty when we would travel places. I would take pictures of, I didn't really understand why people took pictures of people. It didn't make that much sense to me. Like, oh, I know this person. Why do I need a picture of that person? I can just see them whenever. It like didn't make sense to me. What I wanted is, wow, I'm going to go to this place. I may never go there again. Let me take a picture of that. Mm-hmm. And so as I started taking them, I was like, this is good, but I want it to be better. Like, how can this be more interesting? How can I show what I see? Because I wasn't really. I would look at a sunset. I'd be like, this is gorgeous. I take the picture and go, that's not at all what I see.
Not what I see.
You know, like, what's the disconnect? And so that's really what I wanted to like learn that ability. And so we would take trains from like, we would go up to Fraser Island from Brisbane. And so in Brisbane, we'd go to the train station. I'd grab Popular Photography Magazine, Outdoor Photography Magazine, and I would read it, you know, cover to cover on the way there, try a few of the things. We'd finish the trip. We'd go to the train station on the way back and pick up another magazine, and I'd read that. So that's really how I got my first like education based around it.
Now, did this camera have any sort of manual controls, or were you still pretty much just point and shoot?
It had manual controls. It was like the equivalent of 35 millimeters wide. So it wasn't like a wide angle lens. So it was like the equivalent of 35 millimeters wide to like 200 millimeters long. Terrible ISO. I mean, if you think about 13 years ago and a 1-inch sensor, I mean, it was just the worst. But I remember one of my big light bulb moments. It was ridiculous, but there were like chickens and roosters running around wherever we were. And I took a picture of one, and it was like blurry. And I was like, how do I stop them in motion? I know I read something about this. What are my settings that I'm supposed to do? And I remember, I think I have to increase the shutter speed, which I did. I was already at the most wide open aperture. I had to, shorten up the shutter speed, which I did. And that made them stop, but then I couldn't see them because it was too dark. So I was like, what is it? How else can I make this brighter? I was like, that's the ISO. And I put the ISO up a little bit, and I got a picture of a chicken running, and it was, sharp and in focus. And I was like, I'm a photographer. And that was a big aha moment for me that sort of was like, I can learn this, this is within my, I'm going to be able to create what I want.
Wow. Yeah, that's totally an aha moment. And it makes sense, if when you see that feedback on the back of the camera and you're like, what is this? What? But then when you actually figure that out, that's got to stick, and you got to be pretty proud of yourself. So that's awesome.
It was awesome. I did stuff like that all the time. I mean, I remember it being up late and having that camera and reading about apertures, and like just being in my room taking pictures of my mouse. I would just like take a picture of my mouse at 2.8, take a picture of my mouse at f8. And just kind of go back and forth between those and just see the difference. My bedpost, just like midnight, just shooting my bedpost, trying a bunch of different settings. And the immediate feedback, I think, is what allowed me to learn as quickly as I did.
That's awesome. That is so cool. So, okay, you got back to the States, and then you're like, you know what? I'm going to try this as a thing. You went on Craigslist, started looking for jobs, found your job. So at what point, I want to know, did that studio teach you anything extra that you didn't know before, or was it all basically businessy and sales?
So I got back to town. I got my first digital SLR. It was Thanksgiving, and they were having a big sale. So I got one of those, and I think I was just shooting around with it, and I sent some pictures to my high school photography teacher, and she was like, these are pretty good. Have you ever thought about a career in photography? And I said, come on, give me a break. When I thought of professional photographers, I thought of these people that I had seen online that were just blew my mind, pictures that I could never imagine taking. And I thought that's the level that you needed to make money in photography. Mm-hmm. So like interested, pretty good, knows your camera, expert, known across the world. This is the level that you needed to be to make money with photography. So I just thought it was
expert wasn't good enough. Yeah, expert wasn't good enough. You had to be known around the world.
And so I think that, so going through, I didn't really think about it before she mentioned it. So that's when I hopped on Craigslist, and I was like, what can I learn? I was like, sports, that sounds cool. I was like shooting for the school newspaper, at college, and like shooting some of the sports stuff there. And so when I went there, they taught me, I I wouldn't say I learned like specifically photography things. I think whatever foundation I had was enough to like get the exposure right, that sort of thing. But I learned a lot on the business side of things. I learned that um, experience, even though you're taking pictures of kids that are just out on the field and you may never interact with them, when the parents come up to look at the pictures, the way that you interact with them really matters. I'll never forget my boss, Chris. We get the same questions over and over again as any business person does. And he would get a question like, how many pictures do you guys take during a game? And I'll never forget that when I first started working there, I heard the answer for the first time, and it was, oh, okay, that's okay. Now I know. But after 100 times I saw him get asked, every time he answered it like it was the first time he ever heard that question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that just blew my mind, because to us it was very repetitive. It was almost like annoying. Like, why are you asking this question again? Like,
Yeah.
obviously everybody knows, but the way that he treated them came at it from like a place, I don't want to say empathy, but it's like their question mattered as much as the person who asked the same question 4 years prior. And so things like that I picked up on, as far as how to make the customer feel important, and like guiding them through things and things like that. I definitely learned a lot.
I think that's important. As you get into photography after a while, it really becomes clear that, and I've said this a million times on the podcast, that photography is a service. It's not a product. And nobody wants garbage service. Everybody wants great service, even if the product is just all right. And I think that is potentially even a bigger lesson than learning how to be technically perfect with every single one of your photos. So that's a great lesson.
Definitely.
Now I want to know though, when you were talking about making your transition into boudoir photography, you said that a lot of people get into boudoir photography because maybe they've had that experience for themselves, or they've seen somebody else who did it. Did you have the experience for yourself? Is that how you got into it?
So I did have the experience for myself, but that was a research after I was already shooting. I was like, what is it like to be half naked in front of a stranger in a room you've never been in, and be that vulnerable? Like, what are my clients really going through? So I did that after I shot Boudoir for about 1.5 years.
So what got you interested, like the very first time?
So I had done 2 paid boudoir shoots prior. At some point, for like next to no money, I didn't know how to price it. Friends reached out to me. They're like, I know you do photography. Would you do something like this for me? I want to give it as a gift, or I want to try something like this. But my friend Lynn Clark, who's a boudoir photographer in Denver, she said that her friend was putting on a boudoir workshop in Denver, like a practice one before they were going on the road, Petra Herman. And they needed attendees to like give feedback, before they took it on the road. She asked me if I would come along and be a part of that. They wanted to have a guy there to see like if that dynamic would change or be weird or anything like that. So I went, and it was 2 days, and I learned that the business process of it was almost the exact same as what I was doing for high school senior portraits, minus the subject matter. So she was like, first part of the experience, you do a pre-consultation. I was like, I do pre-consultations. Then you do a photo shoot. Okay, I do a photo shoot. I don't know how to shoot this stuff, but I know my camera. And then you sell an album. I was like, I sell albums. So I decided that I was going to, give this thing a try. I put together a website. I just set up 6 photo shoots in 7 days. I was like, I need a portfolio. I hopped on Model Mayhem when Model Mayhem was a thing. I posted on Facebook. I asked some friends, and I put together some, a couple of photo shoots, put that website up, and then just decided it was something I was going to make a little extra money in the wintertime. In Denver, it snows, not a whole lot of winter weddings. High school senior season is in the summer. So the wintertime, I was pretty much didn't have a whole lot to do. So I was like, this will be great. I'll be able to make an extra $500-600 a session and just do this in the wintertime. And so that's kind of how I got my start into boudoir.
Okay. So just so that I'm clear, were you living in Denver at the time?
I was living in Denver. I had built my
Okay.
business there. I lived in Denver for about 5 or 6 years, for about 6 years at that point,
Gotcha.
and I was full time wedding photographer, full time wedding video. I shot wedding video as well. I was doing about 10 high school senior portraits in the summertime. The occasional headshot, possibly the offshoot family portrait, but not really.
Yeah. So
So
you were doing work.
I was
You were definitely
yeah,
doing work.
I was definitely doing work. So the transition was actually coming from knowing a bunch of people in the wedding industry made it easier for me to start getting boudoir clients because I just let everybody know, hey guys, I shoot boudoir now. What ended up happening was
Ah.
a bunch of the photographers were like, maybe if we can get Michael to shoot more boudoir, he'll shoot less weddings.
It sounded pretty excited about that.
Yeah. So that was great. I shot a couple of the wedding planners there so that they could have the experience, maybe send me some business that way
That's a good
of their
idea.
clients.
Yeah.
I just did a couple things to just let people know.
Okay, so I want to go back now to the in-person workshop that you did. You said that they wanted to bring a male along to see if that really changed the dynamic. Um, Obviously, being a male, as we talked about in a predominantly female industry, I would imagine that you do face some challenges that maybe female photographers don't. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. The first thing I want to say about that is that boudoir is like a super vulnerable experience for anyone, whether your photographer is male or female. Like
Hmm.
there are barriers that women have to overcome to be comfortable to do this experience. They're going to be, um, they may have things about their body that they don't love that are going to be exposed. They're going to have these pictures are going to be immortalized forever. A lot of women, they're very hard on themselves and they don't feel like they're photogenic. Um, and it is a stranger and these are pictures and what happens to the pictures and like a million different things. So, the first thing to note is if you're a male watching this, know that females also have a battle to fight to gain comfort with a client. And then if you're a female watching this, also know that just because you're a female doesn't mean you don't have to build trust with a client before they come in. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is, yes, I think that males have there are certain things about being a male photographer that you have more to overcome. And I think a lot of that is trust. I think you have to build more trust that you are a professional, that you're doing this for the right reasons, that you believe in, what is your why, for shooting boudoir. Things like, essentially those sort of things. And it's not just, there's a lot of it is because just the people's minds run wild. Like, what is this space like? Is it dark? Is it, am I going to feel comfortable? What kind of person is he? Is he like a social, like women, even if they feel like it might be an awkward date, they like won't go on the date. So if they feel like it's going to be an awkward experience, that may deter them from going. So you have a lot more trust to build. But also there's just a lot of guys out there that are doing it for the wrong reasons. They'll pick up a camera and they'll just, message a bunch of girls on Instagram to get them, naked so they can get some pictures of them. And that exists. And so you have to show strongly that you're not that.
Hmm.
And there's a ton of ways to do that. But
And
yeah,
you mentioned earlier sharing your why you're doing it. Can you tell us your why? Why do you do boudoir photography?
yeah. I mean, there's a bunch. If you guys want a little bit of the full explanation or to see, how that is shown on my website, you guys can go check that out if you just Google my name, Michael Sasser. But in a simple way to say it, so first of all, your why will change. My why has
Of
changed
course.
from when I first started. It was like, honestly, to make a little extra money, and
Yeah.
then it was to have an amazing pictures for their significant other, like a cool gift that you can't buy in stores. And then it became a little bit more about the woman, hearing stories over and over again about just women feeling less than and undeserving of feeling beautiful. And but I've had my own experiences where somebody that I've been dating, I'll say oh, you look really beautiful today, they'll kind of roll their eyes and say, you have to say that, you're my boyfriend. And I'm like, come on, like the reason like I care about you so much and I want you to be happy and I feel these things about you and I'm not lying just to make you feel good. Obviously I'm dating you. I feel these things and I want you to feel them too, but it can get brushed off. So I found that with the camera, taking a good picture, giving them a good experience, showing them that picture on the back of the camera, they can no longer argue with anybody because it's not somebody saying like, oh, you look nice. And they're like, I saw myself in the mirror this morning. I know what I look like. Really what it is they've got to fight now with this picture that shows that they are beautiful. And at that point, they have to make the decision. Have I been lying to myself this whole time? Am I beautiful? Is what I've been saying to myself, is that wrong? Do I deserve to, like the way that I look? All these things that start to challenge their perspective. So I love boudoir photography for that reason, that it gives the ability to kind of change perspective. So that's that's probably the core of it.
That's a solid reason. Just knowing my wife, there's a lot of things I see her differently than she sees herself. Like, I know that. We've both kind of struggled with our weight like our entire lives. And when we first got together, we worked on that and we worked really hard. We lost like more than 100 pounds together.
Wow.
And then, but I still now understand what she sees. Yeah, it's all in your head where like you still see yourself at your largest. You still see yourself at your worst, no matter what anybody else sees or what, it shows. So I would imagine that having that definitive experience, like, no, look, you are beautiful, would be a really powerful moment.
It's awesome
for anybody in front of the camera.
And and for things like that, for people who come in and I lost a bunch of weight, but I can't see myself as that new person. For people who feel like they had kids and like, okay, I'm a mom now and I don't, I guess that part of my life feels like it's gone. For women who just anything, for like who are on Instagram a bunch and they see a whole bunch of beautiful women in bikinis running around the world that are just seem to be perfect all the time. And they, see themselves in the morning with their hair all messed up and they're just like kind of groggy and that's what they're comparing it to. So a million things, but I definitely hear that. I hear, I just had a client recently who said, I love the job that I have. I'm generally very happy. My significant other says that I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. And then I see a picture of myself and I just hate it. And so I want to be able to see what he keeps telling me. And I've heard that boudoir can have an effect on that. So, so that's like a conversation that I had 2 days ago with a potential client. And that is, I think that's a lot of what people are looking for. Sometimes people don't know what they're looking for before they come in. But yeah, knowing that, some women are just, they're like, I'm confident in the way that I look and I just want sexy pictures. And that's okay. I get a handful of those clients every year. But I would say even if that's the case, and if you want to shoot, boudoir specifically is this like everyday woman side of things. Like if you want to shoot for swimsuit brands and you just want to shoot 21-year-old models, like that's great too. Like go live it up. That's a super fun job, I'm sure. But just to photograph specifically women who've never been in front of the camera, I think it can be helpful for them to hear where you're coming from, so that when they do send you that email and they say, okay, I read a little bit about your business and it's not what I was expecting. Like this sounds actually exactly what I'm looking for. And the way you said it resonated with me. Like, that is so powerful to start building trust even before you guys get on the phone, any of that stuff.
Yeah, I could totally see how that would be a different why as to being a swimsuit photographer.
Yeah, you want to create beautiful images and beautiful places and show off, brand and the lifestyle of what your life could be like if you, wore this product or any of those sort of living the
Whereas
dream.
you don't care about any of that stuff.
I
don't care about the brand.
I enjoy, I enjoy like beautiful places, but the brand, I'm not a good commercial photographer. I've tried to like photograph for a lingerie company and then like send those pictures back to the store that like sells the lingerie as kind of a partnership. But I'm just not good at showing off the product. Like even when women come in and they say, we, what do I wear? I'm like, like, here's your outfit guide to be flattering, but know that the outfit doesn't really matter as much. Like, we're focusing more on you. Like, go
Okay.
back and look at the pictures and see that the outfit that they're wearing doesn't really matter. And they'll go
Yeah.
back and they'll be like, oh, okay, that in my head, that was the most important part, but actually I see that it doesn't matter as
Yeah.
much.
That's a good difference. That's a good difference. Okay. Well, I want you to take me back now. We keep doing this thing where we talk about like the past and then the now and then the future,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
I keep going back. I feel bad, but I want to go back to your first client that you had. You said that it was a friend of yours. They just reached out because they knew that you had a camera. Can you tell me about kind of your mindset for that first shoot? Like, were you nervous? How did it turn out?
Hey, Raymond here. And if you're listening to this, it means that you are listening to the free version of today's podcast, which means that you are missing out big time. You know, if you become a premium member, not only do you unlock the full interview with today's guests, where they share so much more valuable information on how to become a successful photographer, but you also get access to the entire back catalog of past interviews with some of the world's most renowned and experienced photographers, who open up and share how they got to where they are and what they would do if they had to start all over again today. Now, if you want to find out, become a premium member by heading over to patreon.com/beginner photography podcast, or just head on over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link on our homepage. That's it. I hope to see you there.
That was a ton of really actionable business tips and steps and ideas there. I thank you for sharing those. And again, it's one of those things to where kind of why I got into doing this podcast, right? Like, I want to talk to photographers who are better than me. And now that I'm asking like more kind of businessy related questions, it is so great to hear other photographers' takes, especially on how many products you should be offering right there. That was key. So
Good.
again, thank you.
For sure.
So I want to go now in, because we haven't really talked too much about shooting. We
Yeah.
haven't really talked too much about the shooting. That is where a lot of people have, I would say, like, specifically in the group, when I asked people if they had any boudoir questions, one of them that came up was about confidence, right? From another male. His name is Sean. He is shooting a wedding, and the bride wants a boudoir session, which he's never shot before. And he said, how do you make her comfortable? And how do you make images that are tasteful and don't cross the line into too much?
That's a really good question. And I think that's one of the things that stops people from shooting boudoir is they're afraid, like, what's the line between like boudoir and something that's inappropriate? And so I had a client during one of the album reveals. She's opening up her album, and when she finishes, she's like, I don't get it. How are they so tasteful, but like I'm naked? She's just like, I really am just naked. Like, I don't, like, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people that the two things can take place at the same time.
Sure.
So I would say the first thing is that your client, your bride, has asked you to do these boudoir pictures. So how do you get them comfortable? She's already at some level comfortable because she's asked you. A lot of people think, okay, this person hired me and now I don't know how to make them comfortable. They're like, there's already some level of trust built that they trust you to take these pictures. So don't feel like you have to over comfortable them.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is to know that they already trust you. So if somebody's asked you, your bride, that's awesome. The next thing I would say is that you've got a couple different perspectives that you can shoot from. And I think this is, you can shoot for the viewership of many, like, what would a lot of people want to see in this woman? That's like the popular, that's the commercial, that's this
Popular
photo
on
isn't for
Instagram.
this person.
Mhm.
This photo is for the viewership of many. That will produce a certain type of picture. What shows off this woman's beauty that is for her? When she looks back at this picture and she says, wow, look at me. Like, that will be a different kind of picture. So I think the first thing is, if you can shoot it from the perspective of the woman, and then I think, being a guy, I think that's one of the things that makes us unique, is that we don't look at it from a perspective of a woman. We look at it from the perspective of a guy. And so that will generate a unique kind of photo. But if you can just do it a little bit with that in mind, I think that'll be the first thing that'll keep it tasteful. The second thing is that play on suggestion. So you can both have a beautiful photo that looks it's like, wow, that photo is beautiful and is not sexual, and have them be naked. So you can have just like a naked picture of a woman just standing by a window that's just beautiful, nothing sexual about it. And then you can have a woman in lingerie or whatever, or you can have a woman in a dress, a full dress. It's a busy day for the sirens today.
Yeah, a lot of criminals out there today.
Monday.
Jeez.
I think it's a bunch of ambulances.
Oh, that's even worse. Oh, that's darker.
So, just give that one more second. But yeah, so then you can also have a woman like in a full dress that's like really sexual, that's really inappropriate, that's covered up a whole bunch of stuff. So know that there are ways to make pictures like more risque. There are ways to make pictures more tame, and the amount that she's wearing doesn't always have a factor on that.
Okay.
So as you're shooting, think if you want to keep them on the really tasteful side of things, you just think beauty instead of sexual. And so if she's sitting there in her lingerie, she's sitting on her bed and she's like pulling up her stockings, if she's wearing stockings, or she's playing with her garter on her leg, there's nothing really sexual about that. So that's just a really beautiful photograph. You can take that all day long and not have anybody assume that it's going to be inappropriate. So that's the first thing. I think if you apply that to a bunch of different things, same putting on her dress, really low back and it's unzipped in the back, can be really beautiful. Again, not really that sexual. So I would say that's probably the first thing that I would say is realize there's a difference between amount of clothing, from completely covered to completely nude, and the amount of, explicitness from, nothing to a lot.
Okay.
So you can separate those two things. But yeah, I mean, as far as getting them comfortable, I would say my two biggest pieces of advice are, they are going to be walking around in lingerie, make a lot of eye contact is the first thing. And the second thing is your energy will affect their energy. So when I get somebody who's really nervous, I sometimes make a few more jokes than I normally would.
Just to break down that barrier?
Just to make them laugh. If they're really, really nervous, I'll put down my camera and I'll ask them something completely unrelated. They'll be in lingerie, they'll stand there, and I'll say, what did you do this weekend, before you came in? And she'll say, oh, I think we went out with friends, and I'll get them talking about a time that they were comfortable. They'll realize we're just having a conversation and they're actually comfortable. So sometimes breaking out of that can be helpful. If they are a really giggly person and you want them to have like some more intimate looks, I'll get really quiet and I'll speak much slower, and that will sort of draw them into my energy. So if you're really nervous and you're showing that nervous energy, she'll feel that nervous energy and she'll show it. So a lot of eye contact, a lot of jokes sort of breaks them out of that, like, oh my God, we're in lingerie right now. Not we, she. But those are probably my two biggest pieces of advice on like getting comfortable.
Okay.
Is knowing that she's already at some level of comfort for hiring you. 2, a lot of eye contact. 3, keep it light, keep it fun.
Keep it light. That's great stuff. That's great stuff right there. So when it comes to actually taking the photos, one of my favorite videos of yours on your incredible YouTube channel is I believe it's the 3 most popular poses, or the 3
like 3 of my favorite boudoir poses.
Okay, can you walk us through those and how they can be applied?
Yeah, so if you guys want to see that, just do like 3 favorite.
I'll link it in the show notes for sure.
Perfect. That'll give you a nice visual. But basically, when I'm taking a photo, I'm trying to think of what I want to show. So the first pose is it's gonna be a little hard to explain.
On the couch?
Yeah, could we, instead of doing that, do like the 3 boudoir tips that like every boudoir pose should have?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That might be. So I've got a couple of posing videos. One is 3 favorite specific boudoir poses, and another one is three boudoir posing tips that whatever pose you're setting up, these should include.
I guess that makes more sense because I can, like I said, link to that other video in the show notes.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it is more
perfect.
visual.
Perfect. So, so the first one is pointing toes. So, women, who wear heels, like they wear heels to get this effect that they look taller, to tone up their calves. It's just a flattering look. So you can create that without heels just by pointing toes. So if you're laying down, if you have them laying down, if you have them on the couch, if you have them standing up against a wall, whatever they're doing, just tell them to point their toes. I say like a dancer. Point your toes like a dancer. You can show them. They'll think it's really funny. It'll break the ice. That's tip number one. Point your toes. The next is to arch your back. So it's that posture. It's that sitting up real tall. I tell them they'll probably be a little sore tomorrow because they'll be arching their back a bunch. And in whatever pose they're doing this, again, it looks more flattering. So
Yeah.
if they're sitting down, arch your back. If they're laying down on their back, arch their back. If they're standing up against a wall, arch their back. Pretty much whatever, arch their back. Get them to point their toes, get them to arch their back. The third tip is hands. We always struggle with what to do with our hands. Everybody always feels awkward, and nothing kills a photo more than hands that don't look like they know what they're doing.
Right.
So I say that hands are a little bit of an excuse to tell a story. So in your wedding photography, in your portrait photography, you might have somebody walking. You might have somebody playing with their hair. You might have her holding her, like having her flowers close. You might have the two of them giggling. What is happening in this photo that tells the story of the photo? So hands can help with that. So you can be pulling on clothing, bra straps. You can be, like being a little playful and hidden with your hands. You can be playing with your lips. You can be sliding your fingers across your skin. Any of these sort of things will add to a little bit of that suggestive, a little bit of that story. A lot of it should feel like what's happening in the next photo. So if you're doing like this, if you're pulling on your shirt, what's happening in the next photo? It's showing a little bit more. That's a way to kind of make it suggestive while staying tasteful versus showing everything. So those are the three biggest tips: is point your toes, arch your back, and then have your hands tell a little bit of a story by playing with your hair, tugging on clothing, sliding around your skin.
Just like making some movement? Is that it?
Making some movement, but purposeful movement.
Sure.
Like if
not
you were,
like jazz hands.
Yeah, jazz hands. Like what a lot of people do is I'll say, put your hands in your hair, and they'll go like this. And like, this doesn't look like anything because people don't really do this. So you say, run your hands through your hair, and they'll go like this. Okay. And all of these motions, this is natural. This is actually how your hands do it, not this. Same with, if you say, let's put your hand on your collarbone, they may just go like this. But if you say, slide your finger across your collarbone, they'll go like this.
Okay. Wow. Very good distinction.
Yeah. So that's the thing is, I think a lot of people, they focus on like, what is the pose? It's this, like, where do you want me to put my hands? And everything's so stiff and strong. And the whole goal is to snap them out of that, like, what is a pose supposed to look like? And like, what would you honestly be doing in this situation if you were tugging on your clothes?
Right. This a few weeks ago, I had a shoot with a model, and I asked her. I was like, "Go ahead." And now I don't know exactly what the phrase that I used was, but it was something to the effect of, "I wanted that look of her running her fingers through her hair." But apparently, I said it totally wrong, and she just had like a ponytail, and she just like grabbed it and pulled it off to the side. And I was like, "Yeah, no, I did that wrong. I didn't use any of those photos." But no, that's a great tip. That's a great tip for sure.
Awesome.
So I have another question here from Erica in the group, and I'll be really mindful of your time because I know that we
No. Hey,
over.
Let's whatever they need, whatever anybody needs, let's do it.
We got two last questions here.
All right.
So this question is from Erica, who's in the group, and she wants to know how you make women who are not models look fabulous. So I guess she means feel fabulous. And that's it. Next question. Next part of that was how do you make them feel comfortable? But we already talked about that. So how do you make women who are not models look fabulous?
So the first thing, I think this is a lot of a mindset photographer thing. So the first thing you need to do is to remove the idea that models are the only ones who look fabulous. This is a really small distinction, but our idea of boudoir is not about the photographer, right? Boudoir is about the client. and their perception of beauty is more important than our perception of beauty. So
Yes.
I want to come out with a video on this, talking about a bunch of things. So I've written down some things about this, but basically, your idea of what's beautiful or what's fabulous, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but it's, you know, when a woman comes in who's like more curvy than the average woman, she knows what she looks like, and what she's going to be basing, you know, her idea of what she looks like is based on that, not based on you know, what you've seen of women and other, you know, of model pictures that you've seen. You're not trying to make her look like this bikini model that's, you know, in the Cayman Islands on a boat, like, you know, living it up. You're trying to make her look like the best version of her. So that's the first distinction, is sort of removing this idea of what people are supposed to look like, which is really hard to do. That's really, really, really hard to do for men and women. The next thing that I think is really important is to look at a person, like truly look at a person and find what you do find beautiful about them. Now, because of our perceived, you know, versions of beauty, that could be challenging. But for instance, if somebody has, you know, is like a pencil, but has really long legs, like, that's awesome. I'm going to take a bunch of pictures of their really long legs. And when they see them, they're like, oh my God, my legs look so long. This is so amazing. There are ways to put a little bit of curve into them by doing things like arching your back and pointing your toes in a couple of the angles, which you'll learn after you shoot a lot more. But the first thing is to just look at this person. What's unique about this person? What do they love about themselves? And find a way to really show that. You can be very selective. What I love about Boudoir is that it doesn't have to be the whole person all of the time. If you just want to photograph the line of their back and get that in really beautiful light, you can do it and it looks amazing. If you want to do just their lips, you can do that and it looks amazing. If you want to do a shot of just their legs, you can do that and it looks amazing. You don't have to photograph the whole of them every time. So I love that creativity that we have. So that's the first thing. Look at somebody and photograph you know, what you see in them as are these beautiful things. The next thing is I try and do is when somebody has something that they say that they dislike about themselves, like I'm self-conscious about my stomach. There are poses where you can have them lay out and stretch their arms up that will thin that out. Mm-hmm. I will try and get a picture of that, because if they can leave saying I've been hard about myself, about my stomach for a long time, and now they see a picture of themselves where they're like, that actually looks pretty good, you've done something really good for this person. So when you're thinking like, how do I make a woman who's not a model look like a model? That's not really the goal. The goal is to take somebody who looks a certain way and photograph the best version of themselves. I think if you can change that, that's the first bit of mindset. And then there's a million tricks that you can use to, like, you know, if they're self-conscious about their stomach, you can put them in poses of that hides, you know, their mid area. If they think their legs are really short, you can put them in heels. If they, you know, if they've got a double chin in a bunch of areas and they're really self-conscious of that, you can shoot a little bit more from above, and so it won't be seen. So there are like specific posing things that you can do. But I think if you change a little bit of your mindset, that'll make this so much easier. So that's the first thing. You know, that's kind of how I would answer that question.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to help a ton. And that brought up an interesting question from me, which is, how often do you find that your clients are like self-deprecating on themselves, as far as like, because I would imagine that, you know, if you were, I found this as a wedding photographer, I go up and I take a photo of somebody, like it'll be like a nice close-up portrait, and they'll say something like, oh, I hit my nose, you know, like, what do you say in that situation? Like in that moment, do you just brush it off?
Well, I talk about one of my insecurities. Mm-hmm. So share your experience. People might think, well, you are just photographing a lot of beautiful women all the time. I just see your pictures. And so you don't, you know, you can't relate. Right. A lot of times people think they're the only ones going through whatever they're going through. So I my smile, if this is in podcast, you won't be able to see this, but when I smile, I've got these really deep, we got these deep smile lines, which I really didn't like for a long time. This goes back to your why. So I'll tell them the story of I got my smile lines I really didn't like. So for a bunch of years, for 2 years, I didn't really smile that much in pictures, which is silly because I'm a pretty happy guy. But I just did this little minimal, smile that didn't show my teeth. So I didn't like these lines. They represent people who are old, and they represent people, we all wrinkles and everything. And at some point I was just like, why am I not smiling in these pictures? This is the dumbest thing ever. Like, I'm a happy person. I can either choose that I dislike this about myself, or I can accept that this is a part of me and it makes me who I am. And that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
What you find about yourself, positive or negative, is a choice. It's literally as easy as deciding my nose is whatever. I've got my grandmother's nose, and that's awesome. I have a part of her. And, instead of being like, my nose makes me feel old, right? So I'll tell a story like that and try and get inside their head, try and get their perspective to change a little bit. So that's one thing that I'll do. Another is I thought about doing this like no negativity jar. If you say something bad about yourself, you have to put like $1 in the jar.
That's a great idea.
Which was a fun idea because I want to promote positivity. You don't want to ignore. You don't want to say, like, brush it off. Like, your nose is beautiful. You have nothing to worry about. Like, why are you look gorgeous. Like don't be silly. You don't want to dismiss what they're saying, but you do want to, say, I'm, whatever. I'm sure your significant other, I'm sure that's something that people comment all the time, that they love your nose, and they'll be like, you know what, they do, but I just don't like it. Well, maybe it's your perspective that is the one that is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, boudoir is just so powerful, and just like, it's all perspective stuff. Like, we've all seen women go around that you would assume like, that woman doesn't look very in shape. How is she just like walking around in a tiny dress and she's owning it? And she looks so happy and so confident in who she is. When I like work out every day and I feel like, like I can't even stand to look at myself. It's because it's this. It's because it's all in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think boudoir, you've got the pictures that have the ability to change perspective. So I take those opportunities to try and help, kind of share this philosophy that the whole thing about life in general is like your perspective, and you can walk around hating your nose, your chin, or that you've got a better side, or any of those things. Or you can embrace who you are and decide that you love that part of yourself, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I deal with people who are negative.
Yeah.
But
why did you decide to not do the negativity jar?
Just because it was, I don't know. I like had it in Colorado, and then when I came out to LA, I didn't do it. I didn't get as much of it, and I decided to speak more about like my story, and everybody has a story like that, I think.
Yeah. I guess it would be hard when somebody's like in lingerie, or they probably don't carry a wallet on them to just keep pulling out that.
It's kind of a fun idea, and at the end I'm going to donate it to some, whatever charity, or I don't know, whatever it would be. But I think it's a good idea. But
if it can be incorporated in the right way. Okay, cool. So I know that we talked a little bit about this earlier, about the turning negatives into positives when it comes to editing for you. But kind of a follow-up question from Erica was, what's your philosophy on editing, and where are your boundaries?
So I'll do whatever a client wants me to do. I'll just try and get them not to. So the very first thing that we talk about, how much do you edit? I say blemishes. If you got like blemishes or something like that, like you woke up with a zit, like I'm going to take that out. If you got a bruise, I say non-permanent things. So anything non-permanent, that just gets taken out. That's real easy. If you are in dire need of, removing your stretch marks, you can, but know that stretch marks aren't, there's no research that has any connection between that. I photographed a 20-year-old soccer player, like college athlete, Division I soccer player who's got stretch marks. Like, I guarantee that they don't mean that you're overweight,
right?
And so again, kind of trying to push that perspective change. So that's what I tell them. I set them up to get them to not want as much editing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing, is all in the pre-planning. So that's the first thing. The next thing is I had a client recently who was just like really particular. Can you take this out? And it looks like there's a little inconsistency here. And I had this sort of thing. Can you go in and you can get that? And, I'll do what they want after the fact. But pretty much I do same day sales sessions. So I import, cull, edit, export, slideshow, get them ready for the client in an hour.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to do a whole nother podcast on that. That's incredible.
We can do it. I've got an editing YouTube video that kind of shows a little bit of that process, but a lot of it is essentially, like I've had clients who are 60 years old and they require more editing than somebody who's 30.
Mm-hmm.
There is truth in that. However, you get good at the posing, you get good at the lighting. I never liquefy anymore. When I first started, I liquefied. I never liquefy anymore.
It's very popular, like selective coloring.
Selective coloring, yeah, but I don't think it's, healthy to say in order for you to look beautiful, I had to digitally alter, whatever it is. So I don't do that anymore. So my philosophy on editing is that people should look like people. People should look like themselves. If a client is like, I want you to Photoshop me to death, if that's what the client really wants, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
But because that's my philosophy, I get 1 in 30 clients that wants that.
Okay, gotcha. So just make those expectations clear from the beginning, and for whatever it is that you want to do. If you want to do minimal editing, that's okay. If you want to Photoshop to the nines, that's also okay. Just
if you want to Photoshop to the nines, you just explain it like, I love pictures in magazines, and I think that if a woman were in a magazine photo, that would just make them feel amazing. So I edit magazine quality retouching.
Great.
And a woman, your potential client might say, that's so awesome because I've seen, Vogue magazine. What is it like to be in that magazine? And like you do that editing that way. So that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Great. That's totally opposite of what I do. And there's, the goal isn't to photograph everybody. So you just do what it is you want to do, prep your clients, and then they'll want the same.
Well, Michael, you've shared a ton. You have came on here and you were more than generous with your time and your information. I really want to thank you so much for coming on here. Can you let the listeners know where they can find more about you online? Absolutely.
So if you guys are interested in just like mostly education, I would check out my YouTube channel. If you just Google, Michael Sasser on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. I've got like 30 or 35 videos. I've got one coming out today, actually, where I critique some of the photos of my viewers.
Oh, cool.
So I'm really excited about that. It's the first time I've done that. So I've got posing tips. I've got shooting tips. I've got editing tips. I've got, I've made a video about a whole bunch of stuff. So that's going to be a really good resource. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I try to post daily. I post a couple times a week, but I just have stories of things that are going on about the business and about things that are happening. So that's another fun spot to come check out, hang out. You can shoot me a message and keep in touch. But those are probably the 2 places that I would check out. I've got some paid boudoir courses if you guys are, really want to get a jump start. But I think YouTube is, I got a bunch of stuff on there to kind of pique your interest,
get you started,
get some insight, and just, I think it's been a really amazing to be able to share a ton of information that's been really helpful.
Yeah. I checked out the course because I was interested doing my research on you. I was doing my research on you, and it was really extensive. I mean, it really goes through what seems like everything, even your 1 hour turnaround time and sales session, which I'm really interested in. So I'm sure that if anybody's listening who's into boudoir photography and wants to check that out, they're definitely going to do that. So again, Michael, I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing everything that you did. And I look forward to keeping up with you in the future and all of your awesome YouTube videos.
This was awesome, man. I love that you're getting out and sharing. I do a similar photographer spotlight where I sit down with some photographers, again, who are better than me, and hear their take on business. So I think it's great. I love that you're sharing as much as you are. I think when people say, I don't know, there's another photographer in my area who's charging a lot or who's at a similar pricing point, and that's a bad thing. if we can change the perspective of the value of boudoir and the value of photography, like everybody wins, everybody starts paying more for photos because everybody believes they're of more value. So sharing that and helping other photographers raise their level, I think is just the best thing you can be doing. So,
I love it.
It's awesome.
Again, Michael, thank you so much for coming on.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
I want to know what you think. I want to know what you thought of that interview with Michael Sasser. It was one of my favorites. We had a great conversation, and it was interesting because it's one of those, areas of photography that I really know nothing about. So coming up with questions was a little bit difficult for this one, but I hope that you got a good understanding of boudoir photography, and if it's something interesting to you, I hope that you picked up a tip or two, because in the coming weeks, we're going to have another boudoir photographer on, and I would love to hear your thoughts and questions for them as well. So my biggest takeaway from this episode of the podcast was just that it was interesting to hear Michael's take on getting into photography. Obviously, he went to college and brought a camera with him, but it wasn't until he really got back and started to pursue it full time that he figured out what it was that I don't want to say calling, that sounds too, out there, I guess, but like what it was that he was passionate about, what it was that he truly enjoyed shooting, and then he just went all in. And even though it was untraditional, especially for a male in this industry, he still decided to pursue it, and he has not only pursued it, but he shared how he got to where he is to become one of the most well-known male boudoir photographers in the industry. And that just shows, don't just assume things. Don't just assume things. If I was in Michael's shoes, I probably would have said, it's only women doing these things. There's no woman who would be, comfortable in front of a male like this, because like I said, typically it's, or at least a lot of times, it's a gift for a husband or a boyfriend or something. So being in the room with another male can be intimidating. So I would have, I just would have went in another direction, but it is so cool to hear that Michael just went all in and has just dominated the space. So if it's something that you love, that you find that you enjoy it, don't put, social stigmas, I guess, in your head. Let it just stop you from doing something. Just go out there and do it. If you love it, just go out there and do it. Which is exactly why you're here listening to the podcast, because you picked up a camera, and I'm sure that you're thinking in your head right now, like, oh my gosh, there's so many, photographers in my town. There's so much competition. There's no way that I could make a living doing this or be successful. Don't listen to that. Do not listen to that. If you love it, continue to do it, and who cares about everybody else? And one day, if you keep at it long enough, you will find success. So that is it for this week's episode of the podcast. I want you to get out there. I want you to keep shooting. I want you to focus on yourself. I want you to stay safe, and I'll see you next week. That's it. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.